on, so you want to be a doctor. My name is Dr. Kristen Willmott, and I am a senior private counselor here at Top Tier Admissions. I'm also the director of our graduate school admissions. So I am so glad that you have decided to join us. In terms of my background, I have been with Top Tier Admissions for a little over 13 years now. And I am a former Harvard University admissions and financial aid officer for Harvard GSAS. I also have experience teaching at the K through 12 level as a substitute teacher. I've taught for 3 universities across Massachusetts and New York. And I am really looking forward to digging into some of the great questions that we have received from some pre-med students, from parents who are thinking about what that med school admissions process is going to look like. And we are very lucky because we have Mihir with us this evening. And I'm going to turn it over to Mihir so we can hear a little bit about his bio, and then we will get started.
Great, thanks, Kristen. So hi, everyone. My name is Mihir. I am currently a second-year medical student at Hopkins. At Top Tier, I work with the graduate students through essays. So I do a lot of essay counseling, and then I'm also the academic and standardized test tutor. So that's at the high school level. So if you have any questions on things like that, I'm happy to help with that. My journey to medical school was a little bit unconventional. I worked in things like consulting, litigation consulting, financial consulting, and I graduated with degrees in human biology and economics. And I think that's allowed me to get a bit of a deeper look into the space, into what this looks like, and to understand the process a little bit better now that I'm a bit further into the process. I worked with Hopkins Admissions last year, specifically to help with admitted students and also for students that would be interviewing to help strengthen yield and to help provide the right information to a lot of students during that process and to help admissions with their processes as well. And so that's helped me a little bit as well in terms of just understanding what this process looks like. And I'm excited to share all of that with you today.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Mihir. We are super excited that you are on board with us tonight. And I know that many of you are excited to get some answers from him, given his wonderful experience and expertise in the field of med school and the entire med school admissions process. So we are going to dig right in with our slides here. And the first thing I want to relay is it's very important, as you can imagine, to understand the commitment, right? As we all know, medicine is a marathon. It is not a sprint. This is a long-term view that you will be having once you make the decision to go pre-med. And we get questions from students right from the start of middle school, some of them who are really interested in exploring, what does it mean to be pre-med? What classes should I be jumping on when it comes to my math track, my science track? Ultimately, we like to remind students that we're talking about 8 to 15 plus years of education and training, which sounds like a lot because it is a lot. These are long hours, it's high stress, it's lifelong learning, but obviously incredibly rewarding and is going to require passion, right? And you're going to have that really long journey hopefully be very well worth it. The students that we work with are very excited to be part of the pre-med coursework that they gain exposure to, the clinical experience, the shadowing that they get to observe and join is something that really drives them and pushes them forward. We have students regularly reach out to us about BSMD programs. That's one of the things we're going to get into on this call. For some of our students who are high schoolers on the call or parents of high school students, we get a lot of questions about that because those are combined undergrad and med school programs that are going to allow high school students to gain conditional or guaranteed acceptance into med schools while earning their bachelor's degree, right? So you're moving towards med school, you're accepted into that BSMD program right from the get-go. However, as you can imagine, these are highly competitive programs. So we at Top Tier absolutely help students gain admission into BSMD programs, but the admissions process is much more complex. They do, of course, shorten the path to becoming a doctor and reduce that crazy stress of applying to med school later. Uh, and it's something that we really do work with students on, kind of on a case by case basis. Is the best path to med school going to be pursuing your 4-year bachelor's and then moving towards med school, or ultimately looking at that BSMD option right from the start in high school? And so we often get questions on, well, what are the top programs? What are the BSMD programs that are actually worth it? Of course, Brown University is one that's very popular. They're 8-year program, flexible curriculum, and they're in the Ivy League. Rice and Baylor have their own College of Medicine, very competitive med school program that is going to offer that BSMD program. Case Western is another one. University of Rochester, Boston University has a 7-year program that's going to tie liberal arts in with medical education in that accelerated 7-year program. And then Penn State is another really popular one. For our students that are interested in BSMD programs, we do parse through all of the options with you so that you can see what might be something that jives with what you're seeking. So it's just one example of one of the ways to enter into the med school rat race. Next up, start early in high school if possible, right? So we start with students as early as you're willing for the most part when it comes to thinking about med school. We want to build a very strong foundation. That's what I was referring to in terms of your science track, your math track, AP courses, IB science courses, maxing out on science, and really pushing for pre-calc, calc early on in the process. Many middle schoolers don't realize it, but you're already sitting on a math track. And so we want to try to catch you as early in the process to pinpoint, okay, what math track are you on? Could you use your summers to play catch up a little bit? What does that look like in terms of your track for science in all STEM classes? But also, what are you doing on the extracurricular side of things? Could you join health related clubs? What does your community service look like? Now, regardless of the academic niche that any of my students are in, we're always on the hunt for nonprofit volunteering that you could become part of, civic leadership, civic activism, community service. What are some ways that you can show you genuinely care about your local community? So to be honest, whether you're pre-med or not, we will be hustling and making sure that we're making some very strong recommendations on community service. But it's especially important for those who are suspecting they're going to be on a health related pathway when it comes to med school. So keeping mindful of those activism goals and what is realistic for you in terms of your volunteering commitments and nonprofit affiliations that you could parse through. Shadowing and volunteering, developing strong study habits, right? So you're in it for the long haul. So remaining mindful of the fact that you will be on a higher track. And so your homework load is going to reflect that, right? The papers, the exams, we want to make sure that you're really carving out strong study habits as early in the process as possible, because of course, as Mihir knows, that's something that's going to be very important for you once you hit that med school timeframe. Choose the right college and choose the right major. This is a question that comes up a lot with students, where sometimes they're even asking about, is this a feeder college? Is this the best college for me? What's the pre-med environment look like? Am I going to be part of a pre-med club? Are they good at sending students off to med school? And I love this question because it really reflects the reality that our students, for the most part, are good planners, right? And most parents are really good planners too. If you know that med school is in your future, you're going to make sure that as you think about which college or university is the best possible match for you, you want to see the coursework that is offered to you. And I do like to point out that, of course, science and STEM majors are not required. So a bio major is not a must. One of the most popular main academic niche areas that our students, whether they are middle schoolers or high schoolers, when they sign up with us, a very popular response is, my main academic niche will be bio, because for the most part, we tend to find a lot of students are interested in becoming a doctor. When they're not sure about what they want to do, they tend to put down bio or business, sometimes comp sci as well. But what that means is a lot of students flock to the field of bio, and it's just not true that med schools are saying, okay, we only want you if you're a bio major. You've got to be pre-med all the way. I also hear from some high schoolers where they say, well, I think my major is going to be pre-med. Well, at most colleges, that's not a major, right? So we want to be able to pinpoint what are the majors that exist at the colleges that are potentially on your list and what's speaking to you the loudest. It doesn't have to be in STEM, and sometimes it can be advantageous that it's not in STEM as long as you're accomplishing that pre-med coursework that you're going to be needing. Let's see here. Also, examine the prereqs, right? So prereqs for med school are critical. And for students where they know right from the start of college, I'm headed to med school, let's start knocking off some of those prereqs as early in the process as you can. A lot of colleges are not great at sitting their freshmen down in advising meetings and saying, is there any chance you're going to be pre-med? Because FYI, you're going to need to do all of these things on top of your major. In our program where I work with current college students and I help chart out their curricular pathways, that's something that we do, right? And we look at med schools that are maybe appealing to you and what's the pre-med coursework for those schools. Whatever college you are at, if you're a current college student, you do have, there's likely a website that exists that will tell you this is the prereq list of what you should be trying to accomplish as a pre-med student. But what we like to do is take that a step further and really look at the specific list at the kinds of med schools that are on your radar. I'm going to give an example from Yale because I think it's a really good example. Of course, most students would be delighted to end up at Yale Med School. This is not the be-all, end-all list, but it's a great one, and it's, easily viewable by any student on the Yale website. They're going to ask for general bio or zoology, 2 semesters. They're going to ask for general chem, 2 semesters, organic chem, 1 semester, biochem, 1 semester with a lab. General physics, 2 semesters, biostats recommended. And then also there are some other pre-med coursework lists that will, make suggestions on psychology, humanities courses encouraged. So these are all things that we love to parse through with you if it would be of interest. And if you're a college student who's seeking some advice on curricular pathways, but you also can just pop on to any pre-med course website and start to think about, as I chart out my freshman year, sophomore year, junior year, how can this lay out in a way that also lets me get that major that I know I love, and that also lets me pick up that minor that I might be really interested in while remaining mindful of the fact that I'm also going to need to check off that pre-med coursework. And then also focusing on critical thinking skills, right? That's something that you would probably be doing in college anyway, but especially for students where they know med school is in their future, looking at courses that are going to really ask you to get some practice with your critical thinking skills, juggling a lab and a class, really doubling down on what might allow you to push the envelope in your coursework is going to be critical at whatever college you land at. Okay, crush your coursework. So as you can imagine, the GPA and the MCAT are key. We've given you some information here on the numbers to aim for, right? So we often get questions where students will say, well, I've got a 3.2, how bad is that? Or I've got a 3.5, am I clear for med school? And so that's something where we will chat through what your transcript looks like. It's not as simple as a cutthroat GPA number. You're either above this or below this and plan accordingly, but we will pay attention to a letter grade analysis, right? So looking at your course rigor across your entire college career. And then we'll also look at your major GPA. We'll look at the STEM classes that you've accomplished, the pre-med classes that you have been working on in terms of your prereqs, and then of course your overall GPA. This GMAT listing that we have on the slide is something to bear in mind. But of course, you want to be looking at a wide variety of med schools. And so it's not a hard and fast number, but this is really what you should be aiming for in an ideal land. And same for the AAMC numbers in terms of your MCAT. We also like to say don't overload. Balance is critical. I've chatted with many students in the past where they've tried to maybe take organic chem too early, or they heard about an organic chem professor who's horrible, and then now they're in that class, and they've piled that on with a bunch of other pre-med prereq courses that really are overloading them, and then that results in a semester that tanks your GPA. In that case, that is not going to be beneficial for you. It's also not going to allow you to have a transcript that really sets you on a strong path for med school. So balance is critical. That's why I like to look at the prereq options, or really prereq needs, right from the start of college, right? So that we can spread those out so that you can ensure that balance. And then also seek help in the tough classes that you're in. When you and your family are cutting that check for your tuition and fees, you're paying for the math center, you're paying for the writing center, you're paying for peer tutoring. All of that is woven into your college and tuition fees as part of being a college student. So many students feel, oh, I went to office hours, it was me and 100 other students, and we only ever met with a TA. But trying to really see the very different ways you can get help in class is important. It's not just office hours with a professor. It might be one-on-one time with a TA. It might be starting up a peer study group. It might be getting to the writing center, getting to a math help center, getting to a peer tutoring session on a Saturday morning. So these kinds of opportunities sometimes can fall under learning support, or academic services that most of the time students don't know to hunt for, or they feel like, oh, that's only if I'm in dire straits when it comes to my GPA. Not necessarily. It's also available for any student who wants to go above and beyond, who's taking challenging coursework. You're already paying for all of those services and those staff members to be there as part of your tuition and fees. So you are wise to take advantage of it, in addition to the office hours that you really should be trying to attend anyway. Also prioritize research foundation coursework. So this is something that I think is really important, and it's something that really for students across all fields can come back and kind of bite them later if they don't pursue research, right? So when you pursue research, whether you are in the field of social anthropology or you're pursuing genetics or you're a bio major, the goal is to get faculty mentorship, right? The goal is to not just do research in a lab, but maybe write a lit review if you're in the humanities or the social sciences, or get published in a peer-reviewed journal, or really excel in a class and get an opportunity to become a TA and then a research assistant. It's not just, hey, I'm doing research. Here I am. This is now listed on my resume. We want to really, and what we do here at Top Tier Admissions is we do help students carve out a strong research foundation and secure a faculty mentor. That is way harder than it sounds, especially in today's day and age, and the realities of US higher ed and the stressors that college faculty are now under, the funding cuts that they are enduring, the fact that it's not just undergrads who want to obtain research experience, it's also grad students. My high school students are noticing that it's harder than ever to get faculty mentorship, and that trickles all the way up to college students and also grad students. But determining a research foundation can be very beneficial. You can have entries on your resume that pertain to your faculty mentor, an internship, a lab role that you have, writing a lit review, presenting at a conference with a faculty member or on your own, publishing in a peer-reviewed journal that's international, or also a journal that might be housed at your university. These are all great ways that you can secure a research foundation. Also very beneficial because if you have a strong faculty research mentor relationship, then that person all of a sudden becomes a really wonderful letter of rec contact. And letters of recommendation are also important. So I always tell any college student I work with that the goal is you cannot leave college without having a very strong, ideally 2 to 3 faculty members in your corner, where they're very committed to your next steps. They're very impressed by your work. They hopefully have overseen something outside of whatever class you took with them. Maybe it's research. And that is a faculty member, hopefully a few faculty members that you can call on after you graduate, because you're going to need that. And the odds are really good that you're going to need a letter of rec contact, if not for med school, then perhaps for something else. And also, it's just really, really, I think, something that's very beneficial to students because once you leave college, everything kind of stays there, right? Like you've got your papers, you get to leave with your transcript, but your contacts, the ones that you really do want to try to drag out with you would be 2 to 3 key faculty members. And if you can carve out a research connection with those faculty members, those connections are going to be even stronger. Hunt for research opportunities and faculty mentorship. Okay, so this is some of what I was talking about in terms of applying to research labs on campus, in terms of, pursuing public health opportunities, asking your professors for, is there a chance that you might have any opportunities for me in the lab? Or I just read your journal article on XYZ and I'm really compelled by your research on X. Is there any chance you could use an extra hand? Or is there any chance that I could explore attending that conference that I know that you're presenting at? And then you do go to the conference or you get university funding to attend the conference. And then you hang after and then you chat up the professor to chat with them about their research. There are many ways to kind of get this ball rolling when it comes to research pursuits. Obviously, we at Top Tier Admissions would love to kind of walk you through some unique opportunities. But the first step is something you could do even solo, which is just pinpointing what are 3 to 5 faculty members where I would love to do research with them if given the chance. And then look up their CVs. What are they working on? What conferences are they presenting at? What passions do they have for their particular fields of interest? Not just what they teach, but because of this reality of publish or perish, what are they publishing? What are they compelled by? And is it something that you're capable of assisting on and that you would want to assist on? And then I also mentioned here, write, revise, propose, present, and publish. This is something that not a lot of students think about until they're seniors when they say, oh my gosh, wait a minute, I have all these long papers that are dying a slow death on my laptop. What could I do with them? What should I do with them? Is there anything I could have done with them? So if you can follow this thing of write, revise, propose, present, and publish, it's checking off so many things, right? It's when you have to write that 15 or 20 page paper for a class, if you are in a class that has such type of an assignment, then don't just let that A paper die a slow death on your laptop, but instead, is there a conference that you could submit it to become a presenter, perhaps something in STEM? Is there a peer-reviewed journal that's calling for undergraduate submissions where that paper might be a great match? And then maybe that becomes a peer-reviewed publication, or maybe that's something where you get feedback from a faculty member, and then that becomes your lead-in into getting a research foundation. So lots of ways that we can make suggestions to students on how can you secure faculty mentorship, how can you get a strong research foundation, and how can you grow your resume or CV, right? So there's nothing that says research is a must. You can't apply to med school without research, or list all of your peer-reviewed journal articles here. But if you can grow your CV, grow your resume over time, then that's going to create more opportunities potentially for strong faculty connections, conferences where you meet faculty, conferences where you're engaging with other students in your field that might be beneficial to you overall. Clinical experience. Okay, so as we know, clinical experience is important, right? And if you're pre-med, then it's something you want to be doing anyway because you love your field. Otherwise, you wouldn't be going through the crazy demands that pre-med coursework are going to be throwing upon you. So volunteering in hospitals, nursing homes, assisted living centers, nutritionist offices. I've got a student right now who is, volunteering for the same PT office that he's going for his injury, right? So lots of ways you can get volunteering experience and clinical experience in. And then also work experience can be very beneficial. I've had students where they've had great success as a scribe. They have gotten roles at, the front desk of a medical office, or they're assisting in some capacity within an office, or they're shadowing doctors, which obviously that's not going to be paid, but for the most part, but that's going to be great volunteering and great exposure, and all of that's very critical. We have a really great file that is actually from Johns Hopkins University. They make it available to anybody right on their website. And we have a file that we'll link out and send as part of our post notes from this webinar that I think is a really good version. It lets you track all of your clinical experience, volunteering experience, shadowing, work experience, extracurriculars, leadership, nonprofit affiliations, anything that would kind of be useful for an eventual med school application, and house it in a very complete and detailed and organized way. And that I think is so critical for students right from as early as possible. Keep track of what you've done. You'll forget it over time. You'll forget, like, what office was that? Where was I? What month was that? So if you can keep that sorted, that's only going to be beneficial to you. Build meaningful relationships. So I touched on this a little bit already in terms of the research foundation and connecting with faculty. I think the biggest thing is just trying to be mindful of, all right, who are going to be my letter of rec people? How can I get to know them early? And then how can I plan for winter break, summer break? What am I doing? How am I ensuring that I don't have resume gaps and I'm being as productive as possible, which is essentially required of all pre-med and med students. And of course, be professional, right? You want to always think about, like, what would you want your doctor to do? What would you want your doctor to do when it comes not just to coursework, but also to volunteering, shadowing, other leadership experience that you feel might be beneficial to you across this long haul. And your resume or your CV is a guide to everything you've been working to accomplish, right? What have you excelled in over time? You want to make sure that that file that you're producing throughout your college career really reflects your field, your passion, your research experience, your publications, your volunteering, the themes that you want to really pop forward when others are taking a peek at that file. Okay, start reading about the MCAT and med school apps and essays early. So, of course, as with all standardized testing, and perhaps most especially the MCAT, you want to study for the MCAT well in advance. Take it when you're ready, not in a rush. And as we often say at top tier, if you don't tutor, you're up against hundreds of thousands of students who did. So we offer MCAT tutoring here at Top Tier Admissions. We would love to be of assistance to you if you feel that that's something that you need in the process. Of course, apply early and get help with crafting a strong application strategy. It's very common for students to come to us and say, all right, I'm looking at these 10 schools. And we always work to make suggestions on, okay, let's grow that list, right? What's a reach? What's an in range? What's a backup? What are geographic preferences that you have? What are cities that you absolutely want to live in? What are cities where you're saying, I don't want to go to school there? So we want to be mindful of all of those different factors as you think about your overall application strategy and plan that out over time. And then also maintain your extracurriculars and a support system. That's true of all college students and perhaps most especially the pre-med students. Reflect on your why. That's something that you're going to get often, right? I have a student right now who's pre-med, and he is regularly talking about how a lot of his friends get to go out and do really fun stuff, but he has so much homework, right? And that's part of the deal, right? He's in some very challenging pre-med courses, and he's got other friends where they might not be in the same level of courses, the same amount of credits that he is taking. Thankfully, he's very passionate about his field and very confident in his choice to be pre-med. He's got a very clear plan, but it's definitely not an easy pathway. So just going in eyes wide open on that makes sense. And then also MCAT prep timeline ideas. So because we offer MCAT prep here at Top Tier Admissions, if you decide to enroll with a Top Tier Admissions tutor, we do work with you to offer some strategic guidance on, how many months would you need to prep? How many hours are we talking? What's your baseline score looking like? What are areas that you're struggling with? And we will give you a personalized schedule, but this is a good baseline to bear in mind, depending on how many months you have available to you to prep for the MCAT, and then also depending on how you're feeling about your standardized test abilities and how much availability you might have, depending on your particular university, the courses that you're taking, the number of credits that you're in, and what you're up against. And with that, I'm going to turn the next slide over to Mihir. We're going to hear more about his reflections.
Great. Thanks so much, Kristen. So I'll start talking a little bit more about the medical school essay timeline and what exactly you should expect for that, what the big picture is, and what my general recommendations are for students that are pursuing this essay writing, which is really, really extensive. Top Tier does a really amazing job with graduate essays, with graduate counseling. And so this is a bit more focused on that process once you actually get through all that counseling and are more closer to the essay writing and final stages of submitting your application. So as the slide says, some universal principles that I highly recommend for all sorts of application writing in the medical school pipeline would be to emphasize the importance of yourself. What is it about you? What is it about your genuine self that is interesting to you, that is drawing you to medicine? Authenticity is a lot more important in an admissions perspective than perfection. Admissions committees do not expect you to be perfect. They don't expect you to have a 4.0, a perfect MCAT, a bunch of extracurriculars, lots of different publications, but they do expect you to have a really genuine and strong understanding of what is driving you to medical school, and if that is a very forced narrative or if that's somewhat of a more natural narrative that you've built over time and through your experiences in college. And so that leads into the second point. They want to also know what you learned, a lot more than what you did. They want to know about the extracurriculars, but they also want to know what you learned through those extracurriculars. What did you learn through your research? Did you learn about the importance of persevering through research, through a bunch of different hurdles in research? Did you learn about the importance of involving different types of communities and really addressing all sorts of needs, whether it's insurance or whether it's follow-up after a screening? What types of things did you learn through your extracurriculars that you really want to emphasize in your essays? You should reflect a lot on that and avoid describing just what you did. Reflect on and show what you learned. That's really what admissions is looking for in these essays. The next piece is cohesion across the application. In general, your essays should contribute to a cohesive, very goal-directed picture of your application and what you bring to the table. And so when I say this, what I mean is you should, just like any essay, you should generally have an overall idea as to what your thesis is. If you were to summarize in 1 to 2 sentences what your value add to a specific medical school is, what is that? And how can you show that throughout all of your essays? This does not mean that all the essays should be similar and should really be addressing the same exact theme, but what it means instead is that everything should be contributing towards that overall theme. All essays should be pushing towards that and should be showing how you've grown in this theme. The next piece is about your voice. So maintain a professional voice. This entails having a warm, confident, and polished tone throughout your writing. And so Top Tier will do a really, really thorough, extensive job at making sure that all your writing is conveyed in the warmest, most confident, and polished way possible. And the last piece, which is just in addition to what I've been describing, is to show, don't tell. We learned this in middle school, we learned this in high school, we learned this in college, but it's often hard to do. Top Tier does a really amazing job at helping you do this, but try to use vivid and specific moments to convey what you're hoping to share. So if you're hoping to share empathy, don't say, I was empathetic for this person because of this. Instead, show that. What made you empathetic? What did you feel? What were the takeaways from that empathy? Did it lead you to did it lead you to create something new? Did it lead you to address something new? How exactly did the empathy come up? And how did you go about addressing it in your extracurriculars, in your general life, and in your application? So really focus on that showing piece. And if there's one takeaway from the slide, it's to really focus on conveying your authentic, genuine self in a very cohesive way to medical school admissions committees through your writing. Great. So now we'll get into more specific best practices for essays. So one of the main things for essays, especially for medical school, is to start extremely early. You should start brainstorming themes for writing months before you start writing, especially for personal statements. And so one way that I really liked to do this myself was I had a running list of different ideas and different thoughts I had that I thought were slightly unique or slightly interesting or slightly compelling for me on any given day. I would just spend maybe 1 or 2 minutes, maybe while I'm showering or while I'm eating breakfast or right before I go to bed, to reflect a little bit on what it is that makes me a unique applicant and that makes me capable of providing a unique value add to a medical school. So start putting a list together with all those different thoughts, brainstorm themes, think about what sorts of things within that list seem to come up frequently. What sorts of themes does that list elicit? Try to focus on those and craft your unique narrative. You can try to do this closer to when essays are due, but it's a lot harder because it's not just about the number of hours that you're putting in 20 hours 1 week before applications are due is not going to get the same results as if you start really and to start really thinking about and marinating in those different themes and ideas that you could bring to admissions committees super early. The next piece is to outline first, identify some key stories that align with your application narrative. We'll talk about this a little bit later, but identify some main stories, some patient stories, some stories from school, some challenges, some extracurricular stories. Try to identify and put together a list of stories that will help align and that'll help make sure that you have real tangible things to pull from, not just for essays, but for interviews and onwards as well. In your essays, you also want to balance emotion and logic. You want to show both compassion and critical thinking. You cannot just show one without the other. Without showing the critical thinking aspect of the compassion might not mean much. And without showing the critical thinking might not be as strong as it should be. And so you want to make sure that you're balancing both of these and showing both of these and how you're addressing challenges, but are also compassionate about challenges that patients may face in their everyday life. The next piece is to revise thoughtfully. 4 to 6 rounds of edits from friends, families, counselors, and more are super normal. This helps to mimic also the viewpoints of very diverse admissions committees. You will not just have one person reading your essay at admissions, you'll have multiple people reading it. And so you want to make sure that you get several people to provide you feedback before you apply. And the last piece is to integrate reflection. So always try to answer why. Why does this matter? What is important about this? What's the main takeaway here? Why does it help me become a better candidate for medical school? Always answer the why does it matter in each essay. That is going to help just really spell out for admissions what exactly your value add is for that school. Great. So I touched on this a little bit, and now to talk about it in a bit more detail. So building a cohesive application theme. So think through your application theme super early. As I talked about, you want to have a running list in the fall, ideally, before you apply. So remember that applications for medical school are typically due, they open in late May, and you want to get those in as early as possible. Many schools practice rolling admissions, which means you want to get those essays and applications in early. What that means is having this running list of ideas, experiences, themes, perspectives, etc., in a running list in the fall, ideally starting in October or November, making sure that you have a very, very large list of things that you might want to talk about so that you can give yourself enough time to think about the commonalities and the themes that all those different lists elicit. The next piece is to ask peers and mentors, what stands out about you? Patterns really help to reveal themes. If 10 people say you are extremely compassionate, well, maybe you should tie that into your essays somehow. If a lot of people say that maybe you're really inquisitive, again, maybe that's something that you want to tie into your essay. Ask your friends, ask your family, try to ask a lot of people what stands out about you to help craft whatever your unique theme or unique value add is for medical school. So super generic example below is if someone is telling a student that they are really amazing at showing how well they can connect to an audience, specifically through different types of communication. Maybe different essays that could talk about that would showcase examples of doing this through volunteering, through research, through leadership, and through other opportunities. And so you want to really try to highlight and pinpoint all those different unique ideas and experiences so you can come up with a theme that is supported by those stories and by the showing that you're doing in your essays and not the telling that you're doing in your essays. Great. So now getting to the personal statement. So this is the main initial essay that you will be writing for medical school. The personal statement has a limit of 5,300 characters, and the purpose of it is to explain why medicine and why you, through reflective stories, ideally showing growth. And so a general structure that I really like to recommend for this would be having some sort of defining moment or a hook in the beginning, keeping that short, but allowing that to begin to elicit a potential growth arc in your story. And so through further reflection on several experiences, you want to talk about how you grew. Maybe at first you did not know how to work with patients that were uninsured, for example. And now through all of your experiences, you now know how to do that. Maybe you didn't know how to work with patients that needed translators. And now through your experiences, you know how to do that. But identify, again, whatever that unique value add is and how you came to that, how you grew to be able to provide that value add to not just medical schools, but to the future of medicine. The tone that you want to carry in this personal statement is confident but humble, and professional yet human. You want to try to come across, again, as genuine a person as possible for the application and for the admissions committee, because they want people, they do not want robots. Great. So a little bit more about what to include in your personal statement. So again, your motivation for medicine is critical. This is the main thing, the core why that addresses what gap existing in medicine that you hope to fill. After that, you will support that through a few different key experiences. I typically recommend about 2 to 3 vivid, very well thought out, comprehensive, and specific moments in your medical journey. This should not be a long list of multiple things you did, because then you can't delve into any of them very deeply. This should also not be just one experience, because then you can't show your growth as well. You want to have 2 to 3, maybe 4, maybe in some cases 2 experiences that are showing what we talked about on the previous slide in your essay. Again, the importance of showing the lessons you learned is critical. You want to provide as much personal insight into your growth as possible throughout the essay. And some values and characteristics that you could convey would include compassion, resilience, teamwork, curiosity. There is no right answer. There is truly an endless list, but it needs to be unique to you. You want to try to pick whatever it is that you're embodying and showcase this through a central theme throughout your personal statement. The last piece is a forward-looking connection. So I talked a lot about value adds in general, but again, how do these experiences that you've talked about shape your approach to medicine? What is your value add? Why not some other person that is applying? Why not one of the other thousands of people that are applying? What are you bringing to the table that they might not be? Great. Next piece is what to avoid in personal statements. And so this is not an exhaustive list, of course, but generic, I want to help people statements don't really help convey, again, why you've grown. And they also do not help convey your unique value add. Again, why you? There are so many people applying. Why specifically you? We want to focus on that and really avoid generalities and generic statements that kind of center around this theme of, I want to be able to help. There's many different ways to help. You can help as a nurse, you can help as a PA, you can help as an MA, you can help in many different capacities, but why specifically as a physician? That is what's critical, and that's what you want to address, as opposed to just a general, I want to help people statement. You also want to avoid being overly emotional or leveraging pity-based stories in your personal statement. You want to make sure that it does not come across as a personal statement that is coming from someone that does not have some self-composure. So you want to be as composed as possible in writing this personal statement. You want to showcase that you have processed what you're talking about, mentally processed and conceptually processed what you're talking about, and that it is making you a stronger candidate, not necessarily one that is just talking about things in an overly emotional way. We talked about this, but also avoid resume style listing of achievements. You do not want a list of 10 things in your personal statement. That is what the activities section is for. And that is not something that should be in a very, very personal, detail-oriented personal statement. You want to also avoid excessive jargon or technical detail. For example, if you're doing research that is looking at liquid biopsies, you don't want to talk very, very in-depth about the random forest models or the Bayesian methods you use to put together those models and to analyze liquid biopsies. You want to try to lay this out in a way that is digestible by people on an admissions committee that might not be physicians, that might not be researchers. There are people on admissions committees that are members of the community. And so you want to make sure that they can also understand your essay and what you're saying. Do not over edit until your voice disappears. This is something really common. We want to avoid that. We want to make sure that your voice is still there. So it sounds like it is genuine. We want to also avoid problematic topics or takes, especially political takes, because again, admissions committees are composed of very diverse individuals, and we want to make sure we do not potentially offend anyone through your essay. And generally, negative critiques on healthcare should be avoided or framed carefully. You want to be careful picking up problems in healthcare that you cannot offer concrete improvements for just yet. Great. And now, since I talked about the activity section, I'll talk a little bit about best practices. The activity section has a limit. You cannot fill all the experiences that you might have had in college in that activity section. So you want to choose experiences that are reinforcing your core narratives. You want to use action-oriented language, just like as you would in a resume. You want to start descriptions with actions. So you want to say things like led, designed, collaborated, as opposed to saying something like I did X, Y, and Z. You want to show your impact through the activities section, not just your duties. Do not just say, I was co-president, we met 6 hours a week, I'm doing X, Y, and Z. What did that do? What did that yield? What did that do for the community? What did that mean for the people around you? Show that impact. That is what matters. And how do you show that impact? Through telling stories. So you want to tell stories even in the tiny, tiny amount of space that the activities section provides you with. You want to tell stories, even short descriptions are great because that really helps admissions remember you, especially when it comes to interviews. I've gotten several questions during interviews about small little snippets of stories I wrote in my activities section. That really helps to cement yourself to admissions as the person who did this specific story. And then for the most meaningful entries, try to use concise stories to reflect on very personal insights you gained, shaping your values and your approach to medicine. You want to have a strong theme and you want to tie this back to your overall value add and your overall theme. Lastly, try to avoid PS redundancy, personal statement redundancy, because you've already said those things once. You do not need to say them again. Great. For secondary essays, these come after you submit your personal statement. So some big general ideas for this. You want to have a master spreadsheet. Try to track the schools you are applying to, the deadlines they have for secondaries, if any, and the previous prompts they had. Common themes that you should definitely pre-write essays for would be gap year essays, previous applicant essays, adversity essays, diversity essays, why us essays, like why specifically Hopkins, for example, leadership essays, anything else essays like a catch-all essay, any jobs or employment related essays, financial hardship essays, research, advocacy, failure, and achievement essays as well. You want to pre-write, you want to start early for all of these, and you want to reuse ideas. You will ideally pre-write 500 to 800 word essays for each of the themes I listed, and then you want to cut these down to 500, 400, 300, 250, 200, and 150 word essays. Clearly, this is going to take a lot of time. Students will typically be writing pretty much full-time for about a month before they start submitting secondaries. And so you want to make sure, if that is something you might not be able to do, that you start as early as possible to ensure that you can finish the secondary essays as quickly as possible. Again, you want to reinforce the same themes you had in your initial application without being redundant, and you want to be efficient with these, but thoughtful. Secondaries, there's a soft rule that you want to submit them within less than 2 weeks of receiving a secondary from a school. Great. And so a generic timeline that I put together for a student applying next year in May of 2026 for the class of 2031, if you were to start tomorrow. So starting in November through January, start to brainstorm some central themes, jot down ideas frequently, like I said, in a notes app, for example, or on a sticky note on anything that's helpful for you that you can keep. Begin putting together a school list and a secondary tracker now as well. In January and February, you'll start on your first draft of your personal statement and your activities. And in March, you will begin revisions, extensive revisions on those 2 pieces. You'll also start pre-writing your secondaries, ideally in March. In April, you want to finalize your personal statement and your activities. The first draft of all of your secondary essays and all of your secondary themes should be complete. May is when you're going to submit your primary application. You'll be revising your secondary essays, completing all the shorter drafts of those essays. And in June, you'll be completing all the remaining secondaries, writing any of the other essays that came up that did not fall within those themes. And in July through August, you'll be submitting secondaries, again, within ideally 2 weeks of when you've received them. And just a final slide on best practices and takeaways. Again, start early. It is a long road. It's a long process. Applying is exhausting. Iterate often. You want to get feedback and you want to act on that feedback as much as possible. And starting early allows you to do that. You want to anchor your entire application, all your essays in reflection and in growth. And you want to do this through ideally one cohesive theme on your unique value add. Coming up with that unique value add takes some time. Think about it deeply and start early to help you do that. Seek advice from friends, family, counselors, and more. But again, protect your voice. You do not want to over-edit to the point where your voice is gone and it sounds like a very, very generic essay that could have been written by anyone. And lastly, admissions committees want humans with insight, not just achievements. You are far more than your resume. They can see your resume. They want to see a lot more than that through your essays. And so please try to focus on talking about reflection, growth, and the insights you have. Perfect. And that's about it.
Okay.
Thank you both.
Oh, go ahead.
Thank you both so much for that great presentation, Mihir and Kristen, for leading us through that. And if you guys have any additional questions, feel free to reach out to our team. Kristen and Mihir's email is on here. So I'm going to get started with our Q&A, and feel free to lead some more questions in the chat. The first question is about our MCAT tutoring, Mihir. What is the benefit of MCAT tutoring? And if a student is working with a limited budget, do you suggest tutoring towards the beginning or the end of the process? What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, great question. So I think that MCAT tutoring, just as Kristen said earlier, if you are not seeking the tutoring, that is okay. It can be done on your own, but you are competing against thousands of students who have had that tutoring. And so if you are working with a limited budget, what I would recommend is to take a few practice tests, try to get through all of your content review for the MCAT, go through the different Princeton review books or Kaplan books or whatever you're using, and go through all the books, make sure that you understand the content, and then use your tutoring budget closer to the end of MCAT prep. Try to get a lot of advice on how exactly to approach questions, on how exactly to handle the timing of the test, on what tweaks to make in your approach for especially the cars section, the reading section, that you can ensure that you are addressing that in the most efficient, but also the most accurate way possible. And so, yeah, to summarize again, I think it's really helpful, especially if you're particularly stuck on a section. You can help really really improve your score if you're stuck through tutoring, because tutors might just have other ideas that you haven't thought through yet. And if you have a limited budget, putting that towards the end of prep after you've done content review would be my recommendation.
Great, thank you. Another question we got is, what type of med school admissions counseling packages does TTA offer? How comprehensive is it? When should you begin or end the program?
Absolutely. I can take that one. So, in terms of the program offerings that we have, the first one, as we've noted, is our MCAT tutoring program. And we sell that program in as low as 5-hour increments, and it goes up from there, right? So, for students who are just kind of dipping a toe into tutoring and they maybe kind of want to get some framework in place, all the way up to students who need ongoing tutoring through a 6-month time frame. So that is one option. Another, in terms of the admissions consulting side of things, is we sell a graduate and med school analysis and guidance program. That is a program that we highly recommend. It is much more comprehensive in that we really take the time to get to know a student. We work with students in that program right from freshman year of college. All the way up through working professionals who may have full-time jobs and now they are going back to med school, or perhaps they took a gap year after college, as can be increasingly common in med school admissions, and now they're entering into med school. So in that particular program, we evaluate your background. We look at major areas, including academic, research, professional, personal. We give you a top-tier admissions personalized student report that is a comprehensive analysis. It really zooms in on some unique ways that you can rise above your peer applicants. Where are you low? Where are you high? In the time between now, in the moment at which your applications are being reviewed, what are some suggestions that we have for you that are very personalized based on where you are? And that will include everything from summer planning to school breaks to curricular guidance to med school prereqs to an application strategy, essay topics that we see surfacing for you, volunteering ideas, shadowing opportunities, unique nonprofits that are looking for people that you're a great match for. So it's a very personalized 10 to 15 page report that gives you some key suggestions. And then that program also includes hours. So you can choose the number of added hours you would like to purchase that would be admissions consulting. And so we do a report follow-up call with you once you get your report, and then we walk you through the admissions process, including essay help, overall application strategy, brainstorming, proposing particular med school programs to you that you might be a good fit for and you might not currently be considering, but you should, or other things related to curricular guidance, extracurricular planning, research pursuits, faculty mentorship. All of that is rolled into this comprehensive analysis and guidance program. And then separately from that, if you're a student who's saying, well, that's great, but I don't want the report, or I'm later in the process, I just need essay help. I want to make sure I have a very pristine resume / CV, and I want to make sure my essays are in tip-top shape. Whether that's secondaries or every essay that you'll be working on or whatever that looks like, we do work with students in our graduate med school essay guidance program. And we sell that program also in 5-hour increments. And then lastly, we sell a program called our Career Planning and Academic Advising program. That one is for students where they might want, an increment of 5 hours or anywhere up from there, but they might be earlier in the process. They might be a student who was just accepted to college. So for example, I have a student who was accepted to a top university, knew right from the get-go she wanted to be pre-med, but wanted to think about ways to really hit the ground running at her university. So she started with us the summer before she was beginning college. Or we'll also work with students who are further into their college career, where they want admissions consulting and ways to have someone review everything that they're working on and make some other suggestions related to career planning, academic advising, med school planning purposes. So we call that program our Career Planning and Academic Advising program. And so lots of great options to choose from. And we are always available to walk you through any of those if you have questions about pricing and number of hours and what program might be the best match for me.
Great, thank you so much. And another question would be, what advice do you have for students who may have a lower GPA early in college?
Sure, absolutely. So a lower GPA in college gives us a little bit of info, right? But we're still missing so much. We take very seriously the notion of, all right, we want your real transcript. We're going to show you how to request that from the registrars, and we're going to look at that, right? Because that's what programs will look at. So we would be paying attention to your academic rigor, the course load that you're juggling. How many credits are you juggling? What credits did you bring into the university? Did you hit the ground running in courses that were maybe too challenging because you transferred in so many APs or community college courses? What's your major? What's your minor? So it's very common for me to have students say, oh my goodness, my freshman year was a nightmare. I had XYZ going on. Is med school off the table? Is business school off the table? What does this look like for me? So we would probably, unfortunately, in this case, need more information, right? When you say low GPA, what do you mean? And then also we are ever mindful of the fact that when you're being evaluated in admissions, they are going to take note of a grade incline, right? Where there are extenuating circumstances. Might you be prepping an essay about what happened, given those extenuating circumstances? Is there a grade incline after that disastrous freshman year? So we like to view it as it's not off the table. We just need more information to understand what you were up against and what your academic rigor looks like and what the rest of your academic pathway is likely to be. So that's something where we really would need a copy of the transcript. It's common for me to have students say, well, this is my GPA. What do you think? And we always like to say, well, actually, if we could get a copy of that PDF of the transcript, it will offer us so much more information so that we can give you informed guidance.
Great, thank you so much. So those are all of our questions for tonight.
Thank you so much for joining us, and huge thanks to Jennifer and to Mihir. We are so glad that you were able to be part of our webinar this evening, and thank you so much for your time.